Hello, Jimmy. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for being on with me.
No problem. No problem at all. Let me shift this over here real quick. All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, great. All right. Well, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I just wanted to ask you a few questions. We're using your textbook, great book by the way, for my class, web design. So,
Great.
but
All
first,
right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. So,
no problem. First question: can you tell me a little about your education background and your experience with educational technology?
yep. So, I received my bachelor's in Spanish from the University of Iowa. And then after that, I proceeded to get a master's in teaching, and then from the University of Iowa, and then received my master's in educational leadership from Cardinal Stritch University in Milwaukee. And I'm currently pursuing my EDS for the superintendent's licensure here in Iowa again, but at Drake University this time. So, in terms of my education, as far as technology goes, I'm kind of a self-taught, I guess, by learning from others and more from modeling and recognizing, understanding the importance of recognizing that we live in a digital age, and really feeling that I need to model that, especially if I'm going to be asking our staff and our students to be connected learners in the classroom and also outside school, then I need to model that. So honestly, I've just learned from others, connecting and just by modeling and through trial and error more than anything. I don't have any education in it, that's for sure. So
YouTube's
I've
great
not done
too.
that.
How has technology changed the way that you teach?
Well, in this case, it's probably more how I lead than more I teach. But I would certainly say that it is something that's always in the forefront of what we do, especially when it comes to public education. There's a lot of different reasons for it, in my opinion, in terms of why we use technology. Number one, again, I'm going to go back to the importance of modeling, recognizing that we live in a digital age. We can't ignore the fact that this is the world we live in now, right? Since 1990, 91, 92, in that area, or in that era, I should say, when the World Wide Web came into being, that world has changed forever, and it's never going to go back. And so, I've always, seen myself as a connected learner, but honestly, it wasn't until, a little bit more than 5 years ago, when I was 44 years old, that I recognized the importance and value of using digital tools, right, to support the learning that was happening in our classrooms, to support our teachers in their pedagogy, and to support leaders in terms of how they, lead their schools and their school communities. I mean, the fact of it is we have all these tools, and if we're going to, really emphasize and model what it means to be a continuous learner, then I think it's important that we as leaders do that, right? Again, we can't ask kids and staff to do what we're not willing to do ourselves. And so I think it has to start with leadership. And so when you start looking at the learning opportunities for kids in terms of recognizing that their audience has changed and their audience has changed forever, right? It's no more longer just the classroom teacher that's up at the front of the room. Their learning and their audience now is the world, right? They are showcasing their work, their talents, and becoming more producers, right? Not just consumers of knowledge, but producers of knowledge. And so we have to recognize that and be able to provide those resources and to provide that type of support. And quite frankly, support the mindset that says, it's okay to think bigger than your classroom, but to really invest in the work that you're doing and show the learning you're doing, because we do recognize that kids are invested in their learning. It just looks a little different sometimes than what we're used to in terms of the era that we're now living in. So, and then again, as a leader, I think it's important that our teachers also model that for their students, to be connected, to be understand the tools that are available, but also to access those types of resources to give their kids more authentic learning experiences that perhaps, quite frankly, that almost mimic what they're getting right now on their own, right? If you look at students right now in their home and on their own, they're already doing these things. So how can we say, hey, when you're outside the school, live in this world, but when you come into school, we're going to shut down and live in a different world, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. And so, unfortunately, we still see a lot of that happening. And the reason we see that, I think it's because for a lot of adults, they look at this and they're either intimidated by it, they're scared by it, they don't see the value in it, whatever happens to be the case. But again, a lot of that is because we're so used to doing things the way we've always done it. So I think we have to recognize that there are different ways of doing things. And we have a responsibility, and quite frankly, I think it's our obligation to make sure that we're providing these types of real and probably more meaningful experiences for kids that they're already doing on their own. And so why not utilize those tools and then mimic what's happening and the tools they're already using and bring those into the schools, into the classrooms to provide those types of authentic learning experiences for our students.
Yeah. So lead by example and...
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the reality of it is, I mean, if you look at just the digital age we're living in, the amount of technology, and not only that, you know, we still can't forget the learning that takes place because we're using digital tools, right? So if you're even talking about critical thinking or you're talking about problem solving, you're still using those tools to help you solve those problems, right? It's not like all of a sudden, oh, well, we're not doing the things we needed to do because of technology. No, that's not true. Technology is just another tool, but it allows our kids to go deeper into the learning. It allows them to personalize it more. It allows them to take their own initiative and investigate and be able to find their own solutions and be more creative and more innovative in how they do that, right? I mean, that's what's happening. But there's still a need for, you know, it's not like it has to be all or nothing. And I always tell people that for some reason there's this mindset that, oh, it has to be this way or this way. No, it's still a blend, and there's a need for both many times. But we also can't just ignore it and have kids shut down when we walk into schools because, you know, either we don't understand or we're worried about all the potential things that could happen or that are happening or whatever happens to be the case. So I think a lot of times we use excuses and we blame the tools as opposed to looking at the activities, looking at the learning opportunities, looking at these other types of things, even in our own teaching, right, our own instruction, the activities that we're providing for kids. It's a cop-out, in my opinion, blame the technology for any issues that are happening any more than we would blame a textbook or blame a pencil or blame anything else for that. I think we have to begin to look at ourselves and the way that we're providing instruction for our kids and the types of environments that we're providing that in.
How do you convince faculty members that are kind of, you know, hesitant about taking the plunge into technology to take that plunge?
Well, again, I think it starts with the modeling, right? You have to yourself as a leader be able to understand, look, again, if at the age of 44, I'm becoming more of a connected learner now, you know, I'm a veteran staff member. So there's, you know, in that sense, you have to begin there, I think. But number two, I think you do have to, you know, as you begin the hiring process and the onboarding process, you do have to, in my opinion, have a set of standards, a set of expectations, and you have to be clear with that, right? You have to find people that want to be in that type of environment, understand that type of environment, feel that there's a value in that type of environment, and then it's our responsibility as leaders is how do we continue to cultivate that, right? Provide that environment where teachers aren't fearful of change, aren't fearful to take risks. And so that's our responsibility, again, as leaders to model that, but then provide the support, provide the resources, and quite frankly, we have to support, you know, provide the time and the right professional development as well, right? And so it's all working together to cultivate those types of environments where you don't look at it as something separate. It's not something separate, right? It's the whole idea of it having to be ubiquitous, which means it just becomes a part of what we do in our school, a part of what we do in our classrooms. That it's not a separate thing, but it's just all part of how we weave that into the learning for our students. So, but again, I think, you know, for as leaders, if we're not modeling that and we're asking others to do that, then I think we're doing certainly a disservice. And I think we're, quite frankly, being a little disingenuous because we are ourselves, you know, it's easy to talk about it, but I think you have a better understanding and it allows you to empathize more with what other people are dealing with when you yourself are going through those struggles or learning new tools or understanding it. But at the same time, I think if you do it together and your leadership works with your staff and side by side, and also, quite frankly, sometimes involve students or involve community members or families or whatever, it doesn't have to seem that way, right? It doesn't have to be that way. It can certainly be done in a more positive, non-threatening, supportive environment. But I'm always going to bring it back to leadership because I think that's on us to provide those types of environments.
What does the future of education look like to you?
Well, honestly, in some ways, I don't think it looks a lot different. And then in other ways, it does look different. And what I mean by that, Matt, is I think that, again, we have to recognize that for our students that the audience has changed, right? And so I think we have to provide the types of environments that allows us to challenge, to encourage, and quite frankly, to trust our students that they want to learn, right? This whole idea that somehow they don't want to learn, I just don't buy into that. I think by human nature, we are curious creatures who want to learn. But we want to learn by experimentation. We want to learn by doing. We want to learn by, by having others model to us, just like anything else we've learned. And so, but we also can't continue to do school the way we've always done it. And so that means, just in terms of how we look at our learning spaces, the way we look at our content and our curriculum, the way we look at our community resources and how we're utilizing our community to support the learning that's happening. Again, I still think there's always going to be a place for schools. I really do. I know sometimes people think, well, someday will there not be schools? I kind of look at it, Matt, like the theater, right? Like when the whole idea, when the beta and the VHS tapes came out, and the CDs came out, and now Netflix, people would say, well, this is going to kill the movie industry, right? All the theater's going to go away. No one's never going to need to go to the theater anymore because you can watch everything online. Well, the reality is there is still a social piece to all that. People want to go be surrounded by other people. They want to go to the movies. They want to go out. It's not like we're always going to be inside somewhere just living these individual, in cubicles living our lives, right? And so I still believe for school, there is this huge socialization piece that's really, really important for our kids. But at the same time, we have to provide learning experiences that really challenge and really push and really, quite frankly, inspire our kids to want to learn more. So I do see school change in terms of, a lot more school that's maybe done and connected in the community in certain ways. I still think there's those other components that are really important, right? All the soft skills that we know. But maybe it's more presentation. Maybe it's more exhibition. Maybe it's more partnerships with businesses. More and more of that, where it's a blend of school in terms of what you have in terms of this school that has a socialization piece that perhaps begins to connect with these other types of resources and mentors and community members that allows you to have these other types of real world life experiences, whether it's in college or career readiness or whatever happens to be. So, but honestly, I don't, education is not something that moves real quick. So it's not like, in 15 years it's going to be gone or it's going to look completely different. I don't buy that. I think, it's still going to look pretty much the same. Right. I just think those learning opportunities are going to be a little different. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think sometimes public education gets a really bad rap for not preparing our kids for another, a life of work or a life of continuous learning. I just don't buy that. When you look at your own education, my own education, there are certainly things that we are getting and are still in our public schools that lay the foundation that allow us to continue to grow and develop as young people and as valued community members and citizens. So I think we have to get beyond test scores and all the importance of all this other stuff. There's all these other factors that are so important in terms of whether it's community service, civic responsibilities. I just think we need to provide more and more of those opportunities. But there also has to be some accountability on the learning. It can't just be all social aspect as well. So again, I'm not a big believer in all or nothing. So I think the idea is to give kids as many different type of experiences. I haven't done any research on this, but I'm always curious how magnet schools are preparing our kids, right? These schools that have these really specific focuses as opposed to compared to maybe schools that are a little bit more comprehensive that try to provide a little bit of everything. Because I do think for the maturity level of our kids of where they're at, and there's certainly exceptions to that, but I think public education does a really good job of preparing our kids, even though sometimes we get a bad rap that we don't. I just see too many examples. I mean, you look at our young people as they grow and develop and mature, they are doing some pretty amazing things in our world of work and the types of young adults and the types of families and how they're invested in their communities. I just don't buy that. I just think it's way over scrutinized, way over critical. Businesses is great for being very critical and trying to continue to tell us all the things we're doing wrong. But if you ever notice, they really never come up with any solutions to provide for us, right? And the irony of all that, they deal with the exact same issues in the workforce that we do in public education, but they're not critical of their own practices. If anything, sometimes I see businesses are behind the times of how they manage their own employees, and yet they're very critical of how we do school. So, just my opinion on that, though.
So I've been playing around with Google Cardboard, and they have the Google Expeditions. What's your thoughts on this new VR and augmented reality technology?
I have to be honest with you. I don't really have a lot of knowledge. I don't really even have an opinion on that. Certainly, I think there's a place for it. I think it's really cool. I mean, you can see people, medical, doctors that are using, cardboard, these different types of experiences to be able to, not even sense of learning, but also, whether it's during surgeries or saving lives or whatever happens to be the case. But I mean, I think what's really hard about any of these types of things, if you think back to Google Glasses, it's how do you take this stuff to scale, right? Some of it goes very quickly. Other things don't ever make it because it's so expensive. And I think, again, it's a little bit like, I think it's great. I think it's important. I think it has value. I think for some of that, it's so specific and it takes such a special skill set to be able to continue to utilize those. Plus, it takes resources, right? I mean, it takes money to do this stuff, right? And so, you can't just say, well, someday this will be in every classroom again. Some of that stuff never necessarily comes back to a lower price. Obviously computers and tablets and all that have been able to do that, right? But there's other things that have not been able to get to that scale. So, but I certainly think there's a place for it. I think it's very, what I like about it more than anything, it's the innovative part of it, the creative part, the always thinking there's ways to create some of these things, solutions to do things differently. I think that's awesome. So if you think of it more in terms of skill sets than you do in terms of the product, that's where I see the benefit, right? It's teaching those other types of skill sets that then lead to other types of things that our students and, quite frankly, our young adults as they go off to universities and so forth, that are able to do it, right? Whether it's, part of it's the research part of it's the trial and error, all those other skill sets that come from getting involved in these types of things. But I don't profess to be an expert or even have enough knowledge in it, but I'm always intrigued by it and think it's really. I'm always really impressed, but I'm always I understand at the same time that for some people that certainly meets a great need, and more power to them. And I think we need that. So I think it's a really good thing.
Have you tried Pokemon Go at all?
No, that's really interesting too, right? This will be interesting where this all leads to, this whole Pokemon Go thing. So I don't have enough opinion about it because I don't know enough about it. I just know that, like anything else, it always amazes me how our culture grabs onto things that goes 100 miles an hour. It'll be interesting where it goes in 6 months from now, a year from now, and what that leads to. But, the people that are creators behind that, again, just genius, right? Just genius. And it just goes to show you. But, I've been watching my own kids with it, and I just got back from San Francisco. There's kids running around the streets with this, holding their phones and running everywhere. It's just really interesting. But we'll see. I'm sure people will find value in it and a way to use it in other creative ways that we can't think of. And again, what I always worry about is, somebody use it in an appropriate way, and there'll be a lot of attention that comes to that, and there'll be people who are blaming Pokemon Go for all this stuff, as opposed to, no, it's bigger than that. Yeah. Once again, we're going to want to blame the tool, or we're going to want to blame something, as opposed to, like anything else. I think there's always learning opportunities from that, find the way that we can utilize the tool in really positive ways. People will find value in it. And that's what I love about our country, and that's what I love about, if you have the creativity and the fortitude and the willingness to continue to believe in a product that you believe can do some amazing things, it's awesome, right? I guarantee you this, I bet all the people that produced the Pokemon Go are all public school alumni probably at some point. So
I've met more new people in the last few days just, by playing this game than I have, in a long time. So I like that it's bringing, people
just
together.
Like anything else. Yeah. It's just like anything else, right? I still remember, Heck, it's probably been 6, 7 years ago watching my kid play COD online, and Call of Duty online with people all over the world, and it's just another example of we live in such a connected world that we can't ignore that. And I think it says something, right, about the need for people to have socialization experiences, and but wherever, anytime anything like that comes out, there will always be people who are corrupt or maybe don't have the best intentions that will figure out ways to use it in negative ways, unfortunately. But again, that isn't the tool. It's just it's those are different things that we have to teach our children, right? How to use that stuff in a more the whole digital citizenship and the component that goes with that, right? So.
Is there any other resources other than your amazing book that you would recommend teachers check out to become more connected?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, certainly there are books on it. I can think everything from Brad Curry has a couple books on it, right, called All Hands on Deck. I think there's one called 140 Tips for Educators. Brad is another example of an educator who certainly is miles away and really taken it on his own to demonstrate how he can, utilize these tools to support the learning that's going on in our schools. Certainly Eric Scheninger with Digital Leadership is another great resource. Joe Sanfilippo and Tony Sinanis also have, that's a different type. It's not necessarily a tool book. It's how do you share your story, right, using social media. So there's these authors and practitioners and people that have done the work that certainly get it and understand it. But, there's just a lot of different books and resources. But I would also encourage people, to look at blogs, right? There's just so much on blogs, whether you're looking at Facebook or Twitter or using these other types of tools. And I think that's one of the questions you're going to ask. But I do think that, again, it's one of the things we always talk about, and I know we mentioned in the book, is I think sometimes people see all these tools and think you have to be a master of all these tools, just like anything else is, find a tool that serves your purpose. It has a significant purpose for you in the way you use it and why you use it. And if you just continue to use it, just like anything else, you'll get better at it. And then once you've kind of mastered that tool, don't be afraid to say, only if it did this or only if it did that. Well, then you can find a tool that will do that for you too, right? Now you have a couple different tools. So I think some people think, well, there's so much out there and it's changing all the time. But I think if you figure out, why you're using that tool, what's the purpose that it's serving for you, what's it doing for you, either professionally or personally, I think just like anything else, I think it's important to do something, because the reality is this. You're trying to make, especially as an educator, Matt, you're trying to make the greatest impact that you possibly can. Hopefully that's your goal, right? Well, if you're not taking advantage of these types of tools to connect with other people, then who's helping you get better? How are you growing and developing? How are you learning from others? How are you modeling that? Are you taking time for personal reflection, right? We always talk about we have to own our own professional development. So if we're not modeling these and utilizing some of these tools to learn, then again, I think that, I'm not sure how effective we're going to be at the end in terms of the work that we do. That'd be like you right now being a student at the university. I mean, I think that's awesome that you're getting your master's degree and or whatever degree you're pursuing, but advanced degree, but yet you have these opportunities to do what you're doing right now, right? I mean, imagine that. Imagine if you were getting this degree 20 years ago. Where would you be getting that type of information, right? You certainly wouldn't be doing this. So, again, the fact that where you live, who goes to Fresno as a Fresno State University or wherever, can connect with a guy in Iowa right now sitting in his living room having this conversation is pretty amazing, right? And, I'm just flying back to San Francisco the other day, and I'm sitting on a plane thinking this is cool. I'm up in Yosemite, 6,000 feet up in a mountain, and my daughter's FaceTiming. Right? I mean, that's just nuts, right, to be able to do that. And so anyway, I just think it's really important that we as educators, and I'll always go back to this, is we have to model what it means to be a continuous learner all the time. And we are always evolving, right? We're never going to get there. And for us to have that type of arrogance, to think, well, we've got it all figured out, we've learned all we need to learn, then I just think you're never going to be, a great leader or a great teacher, because the only way to get there is to continue to be, model that, learn that, and have those types of experiences.
There's always something new to learn.
That's right. And honestly, that's what's invigorating, right? That's part of what I think living is all about. You think about your life in general. How boring would that be if you just well, I don't really want to learn anything new. I just want to keep doing what I'm doing.
I'm done. Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't seem real exciting to me. So you only get one chance to live, and plus, the whole idea of how do you continue, grow as yourself as a person too, not just educationally, but as an individual too. So.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm going to be uploading this to my blog that we had to create for my class. So.
Great. Well, I'm glad you're modeling the way, and great job, and keep up the great work, and don't hesitate to let me know if there's any way I can continue to help and support you. Okay, my man?
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, you're welcome, buddy. Have a good night. Take care, and thank you again. I appreciate it.
Have a good one.
All right, good night.